Hi, friends. It's casual Sarah today. I just with my webcam and no makeup, and there is an annoying fruit fly here that just seems to not want to go away, but we'll do our best. Okay. So there's a couple comments from my Jane Austen video that I want to respond to. First, I want to respond to something I think that is quite lovely in the comments, which is a lot of people talking up their favorite adaptations. Some people are in favor of the 95 like me, and some people like the 2007 best. And what I love is that everybody is just talking about which they love, and nobody is saying that the other is wrong. Because on this kind of thing, there is no wrong. There is just I love and you love, and both are good. So, hell, even if you love this one for reasons, love what you love. But then we get into the actual reason for this video. The comments that these two comments that I think speak to something that I want to talk about. So I'm going to call this first commenter Mr. Collins. If you know, you know. So here is the essay that Mr. Collins wrote me. Pause to read if you want to read the whole thing. It's a trip. So he begins with some fun negging, saying that I am intelligent and sophisticated, but oh, my friends must tease me for being naive. No, because my friends are my friends. And they know me. I'm optimistic, not naive. So his point, which he gets into about halfway through the thing, is that he objects that I strayed into controversial issues which he considered a stretch regarding the relevance to the movie. And he objects to me he felt treating these issues with enough respect. He finds it cringy for people to throw out their moral stance and just move on. And he later, this is the interesting bit, suggests that I not do this as it is exclusive instead of inclusive. So what we have here is kind of a reactionary centrist, I think. We see this all the time in the discussions about how the left just needs to keep reaching out to the right and make sure we make ourselves as palatable as possible, not stop talking about all these identity politics stuff, and just make ourselves palatable to the right. So obviously I don't ascribe to that notion, because for one thing, I think it's very foolish. The right are not playing fair. They are not they're not working in good faith. So us worrying about being civil and obeying the rules and being all nice to them to bring them into the conversation, it's not going to go the way you want it to go. So there's two things that he could be referring to by saying that I'm throwing out my moral stance. One is towards the end of the video, where, having talked quite a bit about how feminist this book is, and how the themes are a person learning to trust their own voice, and someone who has been disenfranchised finding their confidence and speaking for themselves, which includes a whole passage that with Anne, the character who, to begin with, will not stand up for herself, standing up for all women, and talking about how the fact that men have been the ones to write all the histories and said, et cetera, that talk about women being fickle, is wrong. She makes a sort of nothing with us. She makes a sort of nothing about us without us claim. The men have always held the pen, and therefore that doesn't carry weight in the argument, because women have not had the space to be authorities on their own existence. What was actually in my script towards the conclusion was to talk about how it may not feel as feminist now because things have changed so much. But after going through the discussion, I reached that point and I actually couldn't make that argument. I was only thinking about the way that the plus ça change, the way things have not changed. And so I talked a bit off the cuff about how we live in a post Roe v. Wade world where women and people with uteruses are not being treated as with bodily autonomy and not being included in the discussions. And I also talked a little bit about people of marginalized genders not being treated as the authority on themselves. Again, I had been talking about this whole scene and this that the book leads up to, about how if the people who are being talked about aren't the ones who hold the pen, then the discourse isn't legitimate. So to me, it was relevant. And I guess this person feels hurt or frustrated that I brought up these and didn't give space to the anti-abortion people. I'm not going to do that. Or give space to the anti-trans people. I'm not going to do that. I firmly hold the belief that these are human rights. Bodily autonomy is a human right. And I am not going to engage in that discussion in that moment. I am not going to treat those things as things that should be debated. There are spaces where, unfortunately, we have to debate them. And the fact that we are being forced to debate them is wrong. Human rights are human rights. The fact that people have to ask for them is a problem of the system. And we are fighting that to correct that. That is part of the purpose of feminism and the purpose of social justice work, is to correct that. And yes, there are places where we have to explain that, but we do not have to give space for the opposing moral stance. When the opposing moral stance is against human rights. No. And also, let me be clear that this is my space. So I get to set the rules for my space. This is not a public forum. If you want to yell your opinion while I'm on the street, to a degree, you have that right. You can't come into my space. I get to block you. The other thing that Mr. Collins here might have been referring to is the part of the film in which I state that people whose reason for disliking this film is the presence of actors of color. I say that those people are asshats whose opinion is worthless. I stand by that. I do go on to say that there is room for a nuanced discussion about how the film did inclusivity, because I do believe that there is so much room for discussion about how we achieve more inclusive media. Absolutely, there is. We are not going to be done discussing that issue in my lifetime. That is a complicated question. What I believe is that there is no debate about whether or not people have a right to be included. I said that people who object on the basis of the actors being diverse are asshats, and they are. It's not to debate that, is to allow that position is to validate that position. that media should be all white, or that people have I am not going to validate that position. I'm not going to. Just like I'm not going to debate whether me as a person who has a uterus gets to decide what happens to that uterus. Not gonna happen. So if you think I am excluding people, you are right. I am excluding people. I choose to exclude people who hold racist, sexist, transphobic, etc. beliefs. One of the things that these reactionary centrists talk about is, why can't people have differing opinions and still get along? I have differing opinions from my friends. One of my dear friends really, really prefers Keira Knightley as Elizabeth Bennet, and I really, really prefer Jennifer Aniston. That is a difference of opinion. It's not the difference of opinions. People got them all the time. We're talking up here about moral values. He even acknowledges in the comment that it's a matter of moral value. He just doesn't think people should be stating their stances outright. I guess it's cringe. That's fine. I'm cringe. So if you're one of these people that thinks I need to be inclusive of people with these moral stances that I find abhorrent, if you think I need to make space and debate people who don't believe that someone like me has a right to be represented in media, you need to understand what you're asking me. When you ask people who are marginalized for any reason, you need to understand what you are asking of us when you ask us to make space for these people. I am a Middle Eastern, mixed race, queer, fat, neurodivergent woman. These people on the right, they don't just think I don't have a right to see myself in media. They don't respect me as a human being or my existence. They are not going to listen to me. They are not going to hear what I have to say. When you ask me to expose myself to them and to allow my existence, my desire for representation, to be a matter of debate with them, you are asking me to open myself up to abuse. You're asking me to allow someone else to debate my right to exist with me present. And you are almost always asking me to do it civilly and be nice to them. So let me show you a relatively tame version of what you're asking me to include. So this is a comment I received from someone I'm calling Mr. DeBerg. Yes, I gender flipped Catherine DeBerg. And they accused me of canceling Austin. They what they're responding to is, I do attempt a nuanced critique, and it's a difficult one. I tried. I tried to have a bit of a nuanced critique about the fact that I feel like this version of Persuasion markets itself on its inclusivity, but is kind of doing the bare minimum. So I felt that is kind of it felt a bit shallow. Yeah. If you're going to try and make PR out of it, I think you should actually walk the walk, or don't do it at all. Or do it and don't market it. And this person says that by holding Netflix people to a different standard than I would hold a woman who's been dead for 200 years. That is somehow hypocritical. Okay, and you can see they go on a lot. For one, and like it gets really abusive and appallingly rude. And they continue in the comments, responding to people that start declaring themselves a TERF and declaring themselves a feminist, and while saying that they believe in traditional gender roles. They go on to do abusive dog whistles about the queer community and various people around the world, and it is a lot. And then they sort of half-heartedly gave me an apology, but not for any of the abusive stuff. And then declared that they were only stating their opinion and should not be boiled in witch oil for stating their opinion, which they didn't state their opinion. They were abusive. This is abusive. They're also wrong. Because for one thing, Jane never said any of her characters were white. And there is no reason we could show you evidence of people at Charles Musgrove's level in Austin's England who were Black people. But that's not going to shift Mr. DeBerg's opinion, is it? No. And like this is what you're asking me to give space to, like that I'm being exclusive to say this person is an asshat and to block them from my channel. Like that is not, you call it cringe all you want, but that's moral conviction. That is a choice. I am choosing to block this idiot. You like what you're asking for when you ask people to be civil and nice and debate and give space to people who don't believe we should exist. You're asking for grace. To asking us to treat as equals people who fundamentally do not see us as equals. You're asking for grace. And grace is not a thing people are entitled to. It's not a thing you ask for. And it's certainly not a thing you come into my space and ask for. Because this is my space. I get to define the rules. So going beyond Mr. DeBerg and Mr. Collins, there is a reason that I have so little patience for people who object to inclusive casting. And again, I'm not talking about people who have concerns about how we get it right. I'm talking about the people who, why are they replacing such and such? Why is this, blah, 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 right? So this isn't an online thing for me. This isn't like just a Twitter fight kind of thing. Up until the pandemic, my main source of community, main offline community, was my community theater. It's where I used to volunteer with the costumes, learn so much. And I used to work in the office, and I knew so many people there. I knew every inch of that building pretty much, and it was like a second home to me. And it's been falling apart in the last couple of years. And it's because of this issue. A few years ago, a director who was a deeply unpleasant person on many reasons refused to allow a Black actor to audition for a part. It didn't work with her vision. She was doing a period piece about the 1960s in Montreal, and she didn't think of Black people as being part of that. So she out and out refused to let the actor audition. She said she could come and read, but that's not auditioning if you're never going to be considered for the part, right? And so the actor complained because she damn well should have. And officials at the theater made the decision to side with the director. They knew her. They were familiar with her. I don't know what exactly was going on in their head, but they went with we have to include the director. Even though she had said she'd resign, they kept her. It was a lot. And the actor filed a human rights complaint because their human rights had been violated. And over the last few years, as that has played out, the theater community has been falling apart. Members of the community were so offended at somebody complaining, at somebody having a problem with being denied a role based on their ethnicity, that they've been hurling racist abuse. And in at least one occasion spat on the woman. The actor, not the director. The director didn't face much. And the whole community has become fractured over this. And I no longer felt safe in this theater that had been my home as a mixed race person, as a person who has been spat on because the kids in my elementary school didn't like my funny ethnic hair. I was just not, I am not comfortable being in community with people who would do that. And the whole community has fractured. We've had the kinds of debates that you see on Twitter, but between people who know each other. Bitter as anything. And one of the things that has been most hurtful is the people who insist on being the center and the people who police the behavior of those calling for change while defending the behavior of those who refuse to shift. They say, oh, that was just some random, rotten apple who spat on her. And I saw there was a general meeting where we ended up having, it was a matter of debate whether to give consequences to the director for having excluded someone based on their race. We had to debate and hold a vote in order for us to remove, and the consequences were so small. It was taking away her life membership. The smallest consequences, and it had to be a matter for debate. And I saw people who I've known for years booing a woman of color for trying to explain why this is a problem. And it's been awful. And there's a lot of people who sort of see this in kind of a binary, but my brain doesn't really work that way. So I kind of, what I can see is There are people who are adamantly refusing to change, who think that they are right and media should look like them, and that is the end of the story. Everybody asking them to change is wrong. And on the opposite end, there are people who are fighting for inclusion and who are familiar with this work, and especially people who've had sort of some education on this. And then in between, there are the people to whom this is new, that they are learning, and often they're quite quiet. And I always want to reach out and say, if you need help, if you need to learn how to walk through this journey, I know some resources, and I can also do some help with the basics. And then there are the people who are more concerned about the civility and that we should all treat the people who are refusing to change with respect and give them time when they have made no effort to change and no indication that they want to change. A lot of us are trapped in that sort of middle thing. I don't consider myself to be an expert, even though I have studied and I know quite a bit about representation and the ethics and the stuff. I firmly believe that none of us will ever be done working through our prejudices and our biases. And as someone who is middle-aged and grew up in the 80s and 90s, I frequently find myself coming up against a bit of, oh God, how did that programming get in my head? So I am working, I'm a person on the journey. And I have plenty of space for people who are on the journey in some way. But I'm not going to give space to the people who refuse to take the journey. Because I just don't consider that to be a valid moral stance. I really, really do not consider it to be a valid stance to look at other human beings who are asking to be represented, who are asking to be part of something, and saying, no, you cannot be a part of it because of your race, because of how you love or who you love or how you see your identity. Mm-mm. I have been excluded by people throughout my life, and I'm bullied by people throughout my life because they didn't see me as a valid human for any number of my identity intersections. I am not going to defend people who would do that to others. And if my moral stance makes you cringe, then cringe. This is my space. I get to set the rules. I get to exclude people who do not respect other human beings. And that is what we're talking about. So you can call me naive if you want. I don't think I'm naive. I think I'm optimistic. But I will not give space in my space to people who don't treat other humans as humans. And that includes the right to see ourselves in our stories. That is something I believe is fundamental to humanity. And the people who cry, oh, canceling, it's canceling, it's canceling. You're going to boil me in oil for having my opinion. Cancel culture is not a thing. Not a thing. There is a problem with people on social media mobbing. That is a problem. Other than that, it's mostly consequence culture. And, because this is the thing, no one is saying you should be put in jail for having these opinions. Certainly, that is not what I am saying. Even the person who was spitting on someone, I don't really think should go to jail, because I don't really think anybody should go to jail. But there's consequences, and the consequence of objecting to people who look different than you being a part of media is that you're an asshole. I'm sorry. If it is a huge, huge victimization for me to call you an asshole, you're acting like an asshole. So yes, I called the people who didn't like the fact that this film of Persuasion had a bit more melanin in it, I called them asshats. I stand by it. I had every other possible problem with that film. Pretty much. More than I went into. Even though that was an hour-long video. But I would not countenance that as being unreasonable grounds for objecting. So yeah, I do exclude people. You're damn right I exclude people. Deal with it.